This is a screencasting of a recent DBQ that we did in AP US History. My hope is that by looking at this essay, we'll see an example of some really good uses of the skills that you're supposed to do for AP, and that way you guys can do better on your next DBQ. So a few things I want to point out about this particular student that I think are really important. Let's first go to the thesis that this student has provided for the DBQ. Now the DBQ is on the 1920s, and the question asks what economic, social, and cultural changes that took place during this time period. Now I do want to point out up at the top that the student says the 1920s was a decade of economic, social, and cultural change in the United States. Now if he had stopped there, this would not be a good thesis. You don't want to just repeat the terms that are in the question, like economic, social, and cultural. Those are way too broad of terms to use. However, this particular student goes on to modify what those terms are, which is why this is a really good thesis. Here's what he says. He says that these types of changes heightened resentment towards immigrants from foreign countries that had radical political systems. Know that this is not a factual statement, but it's a much more specific statement that helps to modify the major social and cultural changes that took place. This is a warrant or a reason for the overall argument that there are changes that have taken place. The student also does a great job of connecting these social and cultural changes with the economic changes that took place. So the economic changes that take place here are people were working shorter hours, consuming new products, and he gives specific examples of those taking place due to technological advancement. So notice that not only do we have a specific warrant for the changes, we now have an overlapping of the two arguments between economics and social. But then he does a further overlapping into the cultural issue. And here he provides us with a very specific argument about what types of cultural changes have taken place. He contrasts the more conservative and strict society with a much more loose and sexually free society based upon different types of media and music and celebrities. So here's why this is such a good thesis statement. The thesis statement starts off by repeating the major issues in the question. If it had stopped there, this would not be a good thesis statement. But he modifies it by providing specific modifiers on economic, social, and cultural without being too factually specific, and he overlaps all three issues. That's why this is an excellent thesis statement. So now let's go to the first body paragraph. In the first body paragraph, I want to point out, first of all, the importance of the topic sentence. The topic sentence is really going to help us to organize what this paragraph is about. This particular topic sentence is, America, after World War I, had a new society in which immigrants and minorities were treated with hostility, and the true American national pride was abundant due to the fear of communism spreading to the U.S. and gaining popularity in the Ku Klux Klan. Notice how this topic sentence, like the thesis statement, is very specific without really being factual. What the student is saying is hey look, there were a lot of changes that took place for immigrants based upon fears of communism and the growth of the Ku Klux Klan. Now at the very end we get a little bit too specific with the Ku Klux Klan, but overall this is a really good topic sentence because the topic sentence is telling us what the major argument of this paragraph is going to be without being too factually specific. The student then goes on to provide a number of documents and a number of major outside details that back up that particular topic sentence. So for example, notice here in this sentence, these immigrants were associated with radicalism and eventually led to the Emergency Quotas Act of 1921. That is specific to the issue of immigrants and radicalism at this time period. I think the other thing that I really want to point out is that a lot of students in the last essay use this type of argument, but what happened was they would start off with the immigrant argument and then end up with African Americans or women. The problem with doing that kind of an argument is that you've lost touch with that central organizing argument provided in the topic sentence. I want to now go to the bottom of this particular paragraph, and I want you to notice what the student does here in the last couple sentences. In the second to last sentence, Sacco and Vanzetti, both European immigrants, were put to death for murder charges, but after their execution were found innocent. Notice what happens right after this. World War I led Americans to be uneasy with the new immigrants in society, which led to racism, riots, and murder. Notice carefully that the student does a good job of not ending on a fact. The fact is about Sacco and Vanzetti. The last sentence is analysis. This is the way you want to try and end your paragraphs. Don't end your paragraphs on a fact. Neither end your paragraphs on a document. try and provide some analysis after the facts and after the documents. This tells me why the facts that you are using are significant. So now let's go to the next paragraph. In the next paragraph, the student talks about how the 1920s also brought up a new middle class where people can enjoy new products and forms of entertainment due to the adoption of the assembly line for mass production and buying on the margin loan system. Now, on the one hand, I do want to point out something that I think is a little bit of a problem with the essay here, even though this really is an excellent essay. The essay does nothing to demonstrate a connection between the previous argument on immigrants and this new argument being made on mass production and buying on the margin. Probably a good way to have connected these two together would have been to say something about how more immigration in the country led to more economic growth, and many of these immigrants moved into suburbia, leading then into these economic growth and buying on the margin in the loan system. There's really no overlapping here. There's no connection between the first paragraph and the second paragraph. That is a bit of a weakness in this essay. However, notice that this second paragraph that's being given, again, provides a really specific topic sentence without being too factual. After that, the student goes on to provide numerous different examples to demonstrate this idea of consumerism and the growth of the assembly line. So for example, he has here about how people are taking out loans and buying on the margin with banks. He goes further with the adoption of Henry Ford's assembly line, the increase in mass production, leading to cheaper and more accessible goods for the working American. He goes even further down here to athletes like Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig became stars due to the new leisure activities caused by the economic boom. But notice again, he doesn't finish on facts. He finishes with analysis. The last sentence is, the middle class was able to work shorter days and maintained a wage that allowed them to consume. This gave the middle class the ability to buy homes, hold appliances, and automobiles. Notice carefully, this is not a factual end to the paragraph. It's an analysis end to the paragraph. And notice that he's created a coherent and well-organized argument that still all connects up to this economic change that was made at the beginning of the paragraph in the topic sentence. So now let's go to the final paragraph. The final paragraph starts with, the culture of America during the 1920s changed from a strict obedientness society to a more openly free and individual society due to the increased freedom of young adults, traveling by automobile, and new music and dance that was based on spontaneous sounds and improvisation. Okay, a few comments that I want to make on this. First off, again, the student is doing an excellent job of providing a specific topic sentence. One problem that I want to note here is how long this sentence is. This sentence could be made a lot more concise and a lot more direct in order to make the point in a very quick and very specific way for the reader. So for example, instead of this long sentence, what the sentence probably could say would be something along the lines of, the culture of America during the 1920s changed from a strict obedience society to a more openly free and individual society that challenged sexual norms and youth culture. Something along that line that would just make it a little bit more specific, a little bit more clear for the reader. But overall, this is a really good topic sentence. After that, the author goes on in this particular paper in order to provide both outside details and documents that all back up that specific point. So like for example, if we go down near to the bottom here, it says, due to economic security, parents were able to send their children to boarding schools and buy them automobiles that allowed them to develop on their own without parental infliction of ideas. Notice here what's really important. Here we get some overlapping with the previous paragraph. So here we're seeing the growth of economics leads into the challenge on social issues. I wish the student had done a little bit more of this, because this would have boosted the grade a little bit if he had demonstrated this a little bit earlier on of connections between the two paragraphs. But this is a really good example of the type of overlapping that I'm calling for. Again though, take a look at the end here. The economic boom of this time period not only allowed for the middle class to buy and consume new appliances and attend leisure activities, but also influenced the lost generation, their idea of freedom and loose guidelines. So notice again, we don't end on a fact, we end on some analysis here. This is what I'm looking for over on your essays. So what I would suggest, and hopefully this helped you out a little bit in understanding what I'm looking for in the essays, is this. Work on providing clear, specific, and concise arguments. Make sure that you modify general terms like economic, social, and political. Make sure that your topic sentences are also specific. Make sure that your paragraphs are organized with a concise argument in which all the evidence, documents, and evidence that follow after it follow up the topic sentence, and always finish paragraphs on analysis. I hope this helps out, and I hope you can see some success and evolve on your next essay so you can get to the point where you want to be at. This essay was an A essay, even with some of its minor errors. It really was an A essay. If you follow this model and put in a few overlapping arguments in between paragraphs, you can even get it up to an A+. Thanks a lot.